Today we're going to talk about all the books that I've read so far in the month of February. It's been a decent reading month so far, I'd say, and I've enjoyed majority of what I've read, so that's always a good thing. So without further ado, we're just going to get started on this lovely stack of books, and a couple that are not on that stack. First is a book that I actually started at the tail end of January, but only finished in early February, and that book is The Architect of Song by A.G. Howard. It's a new adult story that has historical elements and is also inspired by Beauty and the Beast. It's about a girl named Juliet who happens to be deaf, and at the very beginning of the novel she loses her mother. Circumstances bring her together with two male characters, Lord Nicholas Thornton, who is someone who wants to take over her sanctuary and someone she knows nothing else about, and Hawk, a ghost she meets after touching a flower that was buried at a graveyard that apparently has special magical properties. And so Juliet embarks on this adventure to figure out what really lies behind Lord Nicholas Thornton's motives. She also tries to figure out the circumstances of Hawk's death. I wouldn't say that this is a new favorite for me. I did like it. I thought it was very intriguing. I just did not expect some of the things that happened in it. That was a really unexpected and welcome surprise. The only thing is I didn't particularly love the characters and the writing. The characters, I just did not feel any sort of personal connection to them. The writing did not flow as well as I would have liked it to. It was very clunky at times, and the word choices were not always necessarily what I would have wanted them to be. Overall, I've got to say it's a fairly easy read. I think like the way A.G. Howard integrated the elements of Beauty and the Beast was very spot on and very interesting, and I really liked that part of it. And I'm actually very intrigued by the way she set it up for the future stories that are to come in this series. I think there are going to be a couple of companion stories which I might check out. It's not a new favorite, but I definitely think that at least it was worth me reading. The next book that I read is the book that we are actually reading for the Year of Recommended Reads. This is a project that I do with my friend Lindsay from Bring My Books. This month's book is a middle grade read that was on our Goodreads TBRs, and it is Cartwheeling in Thunderstorms by Katherine Rundell. I have never read a book by Katherine Rundell until now, but I definitely think I will check out her other works. Cartwheeling in Thunderstorms is about a girl named Wilhelmina Silver. She lives somewhere in Africa on a farm with her father and all of the people who work at the farm, and she's happy there. Her life isn't necessarily conventional, but it works for her and it works for the people who love her. However, one day her father dies, and the man who is left to take care of her, he actually takes on a new wife, and the wife suggests sending her off to a boarding school in London. And so Will is sent to London, and she is forced to confront strange new circumstances and try to figure out, how she's going to continue with her life. It's a very short story, but it's so jam-packed with feelings. Like, the thing I really loved about it was that I could totally relate to Will's, comfort at being in a place that she had grown up in and that she was familiar with the people she loved, and where she was basically allowed to do the things that made her feel most like herself. And I felt for her when she had to move to a place where there were a lot of rules, she didn't know anyone, and it's very jarring for someone at this age to be moved out of something familiar into something strange, and so I felt deeply for her. A lot of the circumstances were definitely a little bit over the top, but I think in a way it very much emphasized the strangeness of Will's situation, and I like that a lot about it. It's a very simple story, and it also gave me a lot of A Little Princess vibes. The story is definitely different, for sure, but I got the same sort of vibes from it, and as you guys know, I absolutely love A Little Princess, so it was really fun to read something that kind of reminded me of it. So I definitely enjoyed this one, and I'm so glad we chose to read it this month for TYRR. The next thing I read was a graphic novel, and it's one that I'm incredibly excited about. It actually came out at the end of January, and I got it in the mail, and I was super excited to receive it. And it is dun, 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 Wires and Nerve Volume 1, which is That's part of the Lunar Chronicle series by Marissa Meyer. The art is by Doug Holgate. Before anything else, I'm going to say that if you haven't read the Lunar Chronicle series, then you may not want to listen to this, because there's going to be a few spoilers for the series, because this happens after the events in winter. Wires and Nerve follows Aiko, who is Cinder's best friend and who happens to be a droid. You kind of forget that sometimes because Aiko acts like she's human, and her relationships with the other people in the Lunar Chronicle series is very human. This is the story of how she decides to make herself useful to Cinder, who is now Queen of Luna, and she comes down to Earth to round up rogue lunar operatives who are like sort of hybrids of wolf and men, and she's damn good at her job, but There are a lot of things that are revealed in this one, like we get to see a lot of the members of the Rampion. Actually, we get to see every single member of the Rampion, which is amazing. We get to see Aiko's dynamic with Liam Kinney, who is one of the guards on Luna. It's just this really fun adventure that has the same feel as the Lunar Chronicles books, and it was just so nice to dip a toe back into the world. I love that we get Aiko's perspective because I feel like we don't get to see so much of her in the actual series, so it is nice to see something from her perspective. Plus, it's also very interesting because she is an android, but you only remember that when you're jolted into it. Plus, the illustrations are really great. The characters don't look exactly like how I imagined them for the most part, but they grew on me, so I loved it. I highly recommend checking out Wires and Nerve if you were a fan of the Lunar Chronicles series, if you loved Aiko, if you just want to be back in this world. This is definitely an amazing addition to it, and I'm going to be highly anticipating the second volume. It also will not surprise any of you to know that I continued reading the manga series that I read the first volume of last month and got super obsessed with. Fruits Basket, and this is the second volume of the collector's edition, and it's got that pretty pastel spine. My obsession has continued. It is just so much fun to read the series. The concept is ridiculous. If you guys didn't see in my last video, it's basically a series about a girl who has been living in a tent. Eventually, she comes across the two members of the Soma family and she ends up living in their house with them. Only later on, she discovers that when certain members of this family are hugged by the opposite sex, they turn into animals of the zodiac. It's just this weird combination of fun, crazy antics and also real emotional relationships, and I just really, really enjoy it. We got to meet more of the zodiac characters in this one, and I really enjoyed that. We also get to see the developing relationships. It was really incredible. Another one that I absolutely loved, and I immediately ordered the third volume. I read an arc for a book that I was really intrigued by when I first heard of it. The Valiant by Leslie Livingston. All you really need to know about this, it's about female gladiators. I mean, that was basically the hook for me, so I'm assuming that other people who hear that will probably be hooked as well. It's really about a girl named Fallon, and she is determined to become a member of her father's war band. On the eve of what is supposed to be the day that she gets to be a part of the band, she instead is faced with the proposition of getting married to a future ally of her father's kingdom, and instead chooses to run away. The problem is, when she runs away, she actually gets caught and becomes a slave for trade. And so she's taken to Rome, where she is sold and becomes a gladiator for Caesar. It explores her journey in Rome, including the dynamics with her fellow gladiators, as well as her feelings towards being a servant of a country she was so opposed to. I enjoyed this one. I really love the concept of female gladiator, and it was really cool to get to see her and her fellow gladiatresses fight in the ring. It was also really cool to see Fallon come into her own. I think at the beginning she kind of had an idea of what direction her life was going to take, and it was all thrown into chaos when everything happens at the start of the book to her. She kind of picks up the pieces and learns what she's willing to do and what she's not willing to do, and she gets smart about how she's going to play out her time in Rome. Fallon is the most well-developed character, obviously, because she's the main character, but it was also interesting to get to see a few of the side characters as well. I enjoyed her relationships with them. I'm not going to say because that's kind of a spoiler, but it was really interesting. I will say that the start of it, the setup to get her to Rome and to get her sold as a gladiator, it was a bit clunky to me. The shifts in story were very abrupt to me, and I kind of felt a little bit jarred while I was reading that, but eventually it finds its footing and the pacing gets a little better, even with some of the fairly typical plot devices that were used in this and a bit of a typical set of character personalities, I guess is what I want to say. I still enjoyed this one. I definitely am looking forward to reading the second one, and yeah, it was totally enjoyable. The next one I read is also an ARC, an advanced reader copy, and it is for a sequel, a companion sequel, actually, that I was really excited about, and it is The Wish Granter by CJ Redwine, and this is the second book in her Ravenspire series. This one just so happens to be a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. It's about a princess named Ariana, and she is determined to find a way to save her brother from a bargain he made with a fairy named Alistair Teague. Her counterpart, because it's a dual point of view book, is Sebastian, who is determined to escape the life in the slums of East Cosynthalas, I think it's what it's called. Their paths cross when he becomes the weapons master at the castle. They end up embarking on this journey together in an effort to save Ari's brother and to save their kingdom as well. It was so good. A big part of that is because I loved Ariana and Sebastian so much. Sebastian was great. He is just my type of boy in a YA book. He's determined to rise up from the circumstances of his past and become someone better. He has a life planned out, but then he finds his life derailed by meeting someone special, and I think that's just fun to me to watch. I loved Ariana even more. She was funny, she was smart, she was so loyal and so determined to do right by her brother and her friend. I just really enjoyed the fact that she was so powerful as a character. Like, she never really gave up hope that she would figure out a way to, you know, win this. At her core, she really did have faith that, you know, things were gonna go her way. The plot of this is fairly simple. It definitely mirrors the Rumpelstiltskin story, and I really enjoyed that. CJ Redwine really has a knack for doing YA fantasy fairy tale retellings, and she did it again in The Wish Granter, and this was absolutely wonderful. The next book I read is one that I got off of NetGalley, and it's called The Bone Witch by Rin Chupeco. It's about a girl named T who is capable of dark magic. This is only discovered when she raises her brother from the dead. And so she travels to a different kingdom to live among other people. Asha is what they're called. I guess they're sort of like witches or mages. And to learn more about her abilities. It chronicles her journey from when she's a servant in that city until she becomes a fully fledged Asha. The world and the magic system in this one are really interesting to me. I really like the setup of the magic system where there are different sort of elementals and different abilities that you can have. There are different ways to symbolize it, which I really enjoyed. I also think that the setting was interesting. I'm not sure what kind of culture exactly is being portrayed in this one, but I'm not sure what specific kind of Asian it was, but it was very interesting. It gave me very Memoirs of a Geisha vibes, which is one of the comp titles for it. The plot was a bit slow because it's very character driven. You're really just learning about T and about how she thinks and how she operates and what she experienced, and it's kind of also told in this style where she is experiencing these things, but then it gets interjected with her telling the story to someone else. Worked for me, it might not work for everyone, so I wanted to put that out there. I think the weakest point of the story is actually the characters. I feel like we were divided from them by a glass wall. Like, you could see them and you can sort of get a sense of why they were doing what they were doing, but it wasn't really the kind of connection that would have made this one a phenomenal read. It was definitely intriguing, it was definitely well worth checking out. And then I read a book that I was really looking forward to last year because it sounded really cute and it was a perfect read for the weekend before Galentines and Valentines, and that book was The Geek's Guide to Unrequited Love by Sarvanas Tash. This is the story of Graham, who really wants to tell Roxy, his best friend, how he feels about her. He decides that the perfect venue to do so is New York Comic Con, especially because their all-time favorite author, who is reclusive and hasn't been seen in public for years, is going to be there. It doesn't go exactly as he planned, as there are a lot of mishaps and miscommunications and all of that over the weekend. This definitely read like a romantic comedy, and you guys know I'm a sucker for romantic comedies. I really enjoyed seeing all of that, like all of the mishaps and miscommunications and like the will she or will he or won't they, set against the backdrop of New York Comic Con. Let me geek out for like 5 seconds about New York Comic Con because I got to go for the first time last year, and you can check out the video for that down below. And it was such a fun experience. Like, I really loved it. The energy in the Javits Center is off the charts when you're in there for New York Comic Con, and it's very different. It's a very welcoming place. It's really crowded, but it's also really awesome, and you just feel like this sort of surge of positive energy while you're there. At least I did. And I really think that she captured it so well in this book. As for the characters, I thought Graham was darling. I really loved like how earnest he was about his feelings for Roxy, and how he just kept like going through the highs and lows of liking someone and not being sure if they like you back. I also enjoyed the secondary characters because they added a lot of color to the story. And I think the story itself and the love story and then, you know, how it ends and everything is just perfect. I think that it was the ending that needed to happen, and I'm very happy with it actually. And I'm so glad Kristen gave this to me for Christmas. So thank you, Kristen. I'm so glad I finally got to read it. And the last book that I want to talk about is Gilded Cage by Vic James. This is the first in a series as well, and I downloaded it off NetGalley. I don't know what to say about this book because it was kind of weird. It is about a world where people are divided into skilled people who apparently have like magical abilities and regular people. And in this world, the skilled people are obviously the people in the position of power. The unskilled people actually have to do this thing called slave days, where they spend a decade of their lives working as slaves. They have no rights, they are not treated as human, and This is just what's been established in Britain. The story centers around a family, the mom, the dad, a girl named Abby, a boy named Luke, and their younger sister Daisy. In the story, the parents and the two girls get sent to an estate to serve out their slave days, and the boy gets sent off to a slave town. It tackles the different power plays that are going on in every place that they're in. It also tackles like the separation between the skilled and the unskilled folks and how certain people want that to change and certain people don't. And there's also like an underlying personal plot that seems to be afoot at Kynaston, which is the estate that the family goes to. And I know I'm not describing it very well, but that's because there's so much going on that's kind of hard to explain everything. I just could not stop reading because I was really interested in seeing how the author was going to have all of this play out. It was very hard for me to guess at what was going to happen, which is a good thing. I would have liked it a little better if the transitions between chapters weren't so choppy. I think I would have liked that one better if I could just relate a little bit more to the characters. I have very mixed feelings about that book. I can't tell you really if I liked it or I didn't like it or it was just somewhere in the middle for me. I don't know. I have very mixed feelings about this book, clearly, and I can't even talk about it. So I say that if you think it's interesting, you should just check it out for yourself and maybe come back and let me know what you think and then we can talk about it. These and the other two books that I got off of the sites are the books that I read in the first half of February. If you've read any of these books and you want to talk about them, please leave me a comment down below and tell me, if you haven't read any of these books, which one you want to read or what your favorite read of February was, because I would love to hear it. Alright guys, till my next video, see ya!